All right, guys. So this is the part two of Act Two of Death of a Salesman. And this one was a little bit longer because we do have sort of the entire end of the story. So we're still building towards the climax at this point, but we are definitely ramping up in terms of action and in terms of sort of discovering these sort of hidden depths of these characters and in the past what's happened to them. So we absolutely see this idea of being of sort of being haunted by your past fully coming circle in this end part. So we start on with the scene where Happy and Biff are having their big dinner with Willie after Biff has supposedly had his meeting, and we see Happy sit down and he is shooting the breeze with the waiter. We see Happy's kind of this man of the world. He's ordering these fancy drinks and he is hitting on this pretty girl that comes in. And again, with Happy, everything is very superficial. You notice once again that women are basically objects to him. It's entirely about what they look like, and he kind of demeans them and talks down to them. And he basically convinces this girl to go get her friend and come back. And at this point, Biff walks in, and Biff has just had some kind of experience. He says he's had the strangest day, and he tells Happy what happened, and essentially that he doesn't realize that he knows never a salesman for this guy Oliver. He's like, where did I ever get that idea that I was a salesman? I wasn't a salesman. I was a shipping clerk. He goes, basically, the real world kind of smacked him in the face today, and he woke up from this sort of 15-year dream and persona that he has built up for himself, or that was built up for him by Willie. And he essentially says that he went into this guy's office to have this meeting, thinking this guy would remember him, and he sat there for 6 hours, saw him for 1 minute, and got basically dismissed because he had no idea who he was. And he got so angry and so impulsive and frustrated, just like his father, he ran in and grabbed the guy's fountain pen and ran out the door. So it was a very strange sort of episode that kind of woke him up in more than one way, as we'll see. So Happy suggestion is to lie to Willie and to tell him that the meeting went great, they'll have another meeting tomorrow, and if that doesn't happen, then they'll have another one, and it'll kind of fade off within a few weeks. And Biff has basically reached a point where he's had a kind of awakening, and he's upset, and he realizes he can't do this. He can't lie to Willie anymore. He can't live some lie anymore. And in the middle of this sort of conversation, him and Willie and Biff, Willie, and Happy, you kind of see them interrupting each other. And Willie's basically says, I got fired today, so you better, I need some good news. And so they're kind of jumping on Willie, trying to understand what happened, and Willie's jumping on Biff, trying to understand what happened, and Happy's in the middle, trying to make sure that everybody's lies are kind of kept straight between them. And finally, Biff kind of has enough, and this all kind of builds to momentum where Biff basically says, enough, like we're going to stop lying. What happened here? I'm trying to tell you what happened, and you won't let me talk. And we kind of go into this simultaneous flashback. So it's a very interesting scene on stage where you have the three of them arguing, but you have this sort of flashback happening here as well. And it's kind of all converging together. And reality and the past and the present and all of these different things are kind of merging. And you're seeing what has caused this rift eventually between Biff and Willie, and what has made these men so miserable from their past. So we get this flashback with young Bernard running up to Miss Lohman, telling her to Linda that Biff has failed math, and that Biff is going to go up to Boston to see Willie. And we hear the woman on the side, and we hear that laugh, that the woman he was cheating with laughing on the side. And slowly these things kind of fade in together. And you see that the woman is in Willie's room, and I'm sorry, and that basically that Biff went up to see Willie after he failed because he went to ask his dad for help. So he has this figure of his father as the hero who's going to save the day and save him and help him get into college, and everything's going to be okay. And he still loves and he still respects his dad, and he thinks he's the most wonderful man in the world at this point. And he goes into the hotel room, and basically Willie and this woman are having an affair. And there's a knock on the door, and Willie's too scared to answer the door because he doesn't want somebody to be outside to discover them. And she's like, she goes, I'm sure it's nobody, just answer the door. And so he shoves her into the bathroom, answers the door, and there's Biff standing there. And Biff comes in and says, Dad, I need help. And everything's fine between them. You see the relationship as it used to be. You see how happy they were. You see how much Biff respected his father and how much he needed his father and how much his father seemed to be there for him. And Willie's trying to get him out the door. He's like, yeah, son, we're gonna go right now. We're gonna go take care of this. And he says, what did you do? And he says, well, he won't give me the extra 4 points because I made fun of him. He was late one day and I stood up in front of the class and I made fun of how he talks. And he does the joke, and Willie starts laughing because he appreciates this kind of behavior, this manly sort of boys would be boys behavior. And the woman on the side laughs as well. And Biff kind of listens and says, what was that? And he says, oh, it's a woman next door. And he says, no, it's from your room. And she walks out and she's talking to them, and basically the lies come quick and fast from Willie. He's trying to cover up his tracks, and it's slowly devolving until he shoves the woman out the door, and she's saying, you owe me stockings. You said you'd give me stockings. So we get the symbolism of the stockings and why the stockings represent such guilt for Willie, and also why Biff lost all respect for his father. So he's standing there and he realizes that his great hero is immortal, and that he is fallen, and he's fallible. And for Biff, that was a very difficult realization. And he basically backs away, and Willie keeps trying to lie and tell him, you know, she just, her hot water was messed up, or she just needed help, and finally Biff says, cut the crap. And he's like, I'm so lonely, you don't understand, you'll understand someday when you're an adult. And Biff is done with him, and Biff leaves. And you see Willie sort of on the floor sobbing, and that transitions us back to the present, where we see him in the toilet room sobbing on the floor. And Stanley, the waiter, comes in, and he basically picks him up and shows him some kindness, and Willie tries to give him $1, and he sticks it back into his pocket when he turns around, and someone makes fun of him. And on the way out, Stanley says, well, what are you looking at? And so you see this kind of pity for Willie from all of the characters around him, and now even his own sons are going to be in on it, because they saw him melt down, and they tried to tell him the lie, and they ended up just leaving. Biff left out of anger, and Happy left with the girls, because Happy is very selfish. And so the scene comes to the house again, and we see Linda, and Happy comes in the door like nothing's changed, everything's fine. And Linda has sort of crossed a line. So on the way home, Willie says that he's gone to get the seeds. The seeds, of course, represent this idea of something new, something that will grow, something that has hope. And this is kind of his last hope, his last ditch ever. He's lost everything. He's lost his sons. He's lost all hope for a job. He's lost whatever hope he had in Biff's business adventures, and he's officially kind of lost his sanity as well. So they get home, and Linda basically is done. She's seen Willie come home. He's lost his mind, essentially, and she's done with her sons. And she calls them out, and she tells, get out, get away from me, don't you go near him, I don't want you here anymore, you are lousy, you are worthless. And basically she's essentially the strongest character of them all at this point. She is the most honest out of all of these men. She's the one that's able to tell the truth and to tell the truth to her sons, to her own family, for their own benefit. And she basically says, pick up this, and she drops, Happy brings her some flowers, and she throws them on the floor. She goes to pick them up, and there's a very symbolic moment where she's starting to pick it up like she always does, taking care of these boys and of Willie. And she stops herself, and she says, I'm done. You pick it up. I'm not your maid anymore. And so we see this very significant shift in the character development of Linda. And she's a very complex character. And basically, Linda and Biff start to argue. And he says, you don't understand. I understand that I'm worthless. I am nothing. I figured it out today. He says, I finally saw through all of the lies. I saw through the entire false American dream that my dad has been building up for me for years. And I finally see the truth. I am nothing special. And so he says, they go out and he talks to Willie, and Willie's planting. And Willie has imaginary Ben kind of with him, talking about the diamond mine and the dream and sort of the elusive dream that's coming. And he talks about the funeral. He says, but that funeral will be massive. The funeral, everybody's going to come. Everybody's come. This is a very dark moment where you're not sure whose funeral he's talking about. He very well could be talking about his own. And at this point, we're really building towards the climax. So Biff goes out and talks to Willie, and he tries to basically shake him to realize, to be real, to be awake, to be in his present self, and to stop with all of the lies. And they come inside, and they basically, this is where the climax happens. They have a massive fight and a massive blowout where all of these sort of tensions that have been building finally just explode. And Willie takes out the rubber hose and he puts it on the table, and he says, we're going to be honest about this. Look what you did. We know what you did. What do you want? Are you trying to be selfish? Are you trying to get pity? And he says, there's no pity for you. And he says, we never told the truth for 10 minutes in this house. So honesty and the idea of honesty is foreign to these men. He says, you're full of it. We're all full of it. And Biff says that when he sold the pen, he went outside and he realized, he stopped for a moment, he looked at the sky, and he realized that he was holding basically the symbol of business success. So American capitalist success, the big businessman in the big corner office in the top of the building with the gold fountain pen. And he realized it meant nothing to him. It wasn't success for him. He didn't want that life. He looked up, he saw the sky, and the sky is what made him happy. And he says, I can't do it. I can't be a part of the rat race. That's not for me. I need to go be away from here. So he basically says, I'm not a leader of men, Willie, and neither are you. So this big American dream, this idea that you are special, this idea that you are significant, to Biff is a lie. Everybody is equal. Everybody is equally insignificant in Biff's mind. Just because you chase the American dream doesn't mean you get it. And it's a very dark and raw sort of truth that he's telling, but he's trying to be very realistic for the first time. This American dream, as he sees it, doesn't exist in this way. It's a different dream for him. And basically they get almost into a fist fight, and Willie kind of runs up the stairs because he's almost scared of Biff, and Biff grabs him, and basically they have a moment. This is the climax where Biff starts bawling, and he says, what are you doing? What are you doing? And he says, I'm nothing. Don't you understand? I'm leaving. You don't have to worry about me anymore. I'm done. But I am nothing. And he basically, through all of this, Willie sees one thing, and he's kind of astonished, and Biff goes upstairs, and Willie, his first reaction is to say, he likes me. He's shocked that his own son likes him. And then Linda says, he loves you. And even Happy is moved by this. Like, he's deeply moved, and he says, he loves you, Pop, always has. And so for Willie, is the truth that comes out of this moment. It's not necessarily that Biff has found himself or that Biff is happy. It's that Willie is loved. So again, we go back to this almost very selfish roots. And Willie kind of has been hovering in the back here. And Happy's going to go to bed. Linda's going to go to bed. And he says, I got to stay up for a few minutes. I'm a little bit wound up. And Linda has almost like a premonition. She knows that he shouldn't be left alone. And she very, very hesitantly says, please, please come to bed. It's almost begging him. And he says, no, you go. I'm going to stay up. And as he's sitting there, he's thinking through how shocked he is that Linda, or that Biff loves him. And you hear the voice of Ben over and over again saying, it's dark there in Africa, but it's full of diamonds. It's dark, but it's full of diamonds. So we get this very interesting image of danger, but with sort of this hidden precious thing inside of it. And that is what Willie is constantly chasing, this elusive ideal rather than the reality that's facing him right now. And the scene sort of fades, and then you hear these voices saying, Willie, come up, Willie, come up. And then all of a sudden, Ben is no longer there. And Willie almost has a moment of panic where he is desperate and alone and scared. And then the scene kind of fades out, and we hear the car crash. And it's a really difficult moment, and we realize that Willie has killed himself inadvertently, if not purposefully. We don't know. And it fades into basically the day of the funeral. And we see Linda, and she's being as strong as she can, and the boys. And Happy, they come to the funeral along with Charlie and Bernard, and they're the only ones there. And it's incredibly tragic that Willie died the way that he lived, which was essentially alone, because he would never let anybody in. And so they have a conversation, and Happy says he's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. I'm going to show you. I'm going to get married. I'm going to be like this great businessman. And Biff basically rolls his eyes like, you basically are Willie. He doesn't get it. He never will. He's going to chase the exact same dream that Willie did, and he's going to have the same empty life. And it's interesting because Charlie offers a different view. Biff basically calls him out. He says he loved so much of this house. He worked so hard in this house. He put his hands, his feet, his sweat, everything into the house. He built it up. He fixed it. He was never happy when he was working with cement. And he says, well, he was in the wrong career. He didn't know who he was. And Charlie corrects him. He says, you don't understand. Willie was a salesman. He says the salesman, he's a beautiful speech where he says, it's difficult out there. You're writing out a smile and a shoe shine. And he says, and when they start not smiling back, that's an earthquake. So for the salesman, when the charm and the offense no longer works and you realize you have nothing else to fall back on, no skill, no physical thing that can be turned into something that is producible, for the salesman, that's when the world falls apart. And then he says, and then you're finished. And he says, a salesman has got to dream, boy. It comes with the territory. Nobody blame this man. So we have this almost tragic heroism in Willie, and this idea of the American salesman and the American dream being kept alive. And it's something that Biff no longer buys. But he lets Happy go off and be happy and boast and dream that everything's going to be amazing. And Biff is going to go back, and he's going to go make something with his hands. He's going to go back to the West and do what he loves. And you get the intent and the feeling that he's probably going to be happier. And at the end, we have Linda, and we have this very tragic, ironic moment where she's crying, and she's saying, or she can't cry. She says, I can't cry. I'm sorry, Willie. She goes, I just don't understand. We were so close. And she says, I made the last payment on the house today. So she was actually paying off things. She's paying off the house. And she says it's so tragic because she says, stay, dear, and there'll be nobody home. We're free and clear. We're free, we're free, we're free. And the irony is that she's not free because Willie isn't there with her. So It's a very, very tragic ending. It's a very difficult ending, but it is a beautiful play, and I hope you guys really, really enjoyed it and kept a lot of these themes and ideas in mind as you read.